Sue Borison here from Your Teen Media. Today I'm here with Sarah Moshman, Emmy Award-winning documentary filmmaker, and she is also the director and producer of Nevertheless. That's the documentary we're going to talk about today. So tell us how you happened upon that stories, and went in that direction.
Yeah, so Nevertheless is something I've been working on for the last 2.5 years. And truthfully, I began this process when I was 6 months pregnant with my daughter, who's now 2.5 somehow. And I really wanted to help make the world a safer place for her to exist in, as all of us do as parents. And so I began down the path of making a film about sexual harassment. And so over the course of several months between fundraising on Kickstarter and starting to do a lot of interviews with sexual harassment training prevention specialists, employment attorneys, diversity and inclusion managers, lawyers, really anybody that would talk to me, I started to understand that having individual, intimate portrait stories, as I called them, had to be the root of the film, because I think that's how we all feel empathy, is through other people's individual stories rather than a bunch of talking heads giving information, education. We really need to feel it and see it and experience like the texture of someone's life in order to, feel emotion for them and maybe change our own behavior or change our thought patterns. And we found 7 individual stories to truly encapsulate different sides of the Me Too movement, but more broadly, gender-based violence, sexual harassment, sexual assault, even rape. And intertwined between those 7 stories is incredible experts that speak to the systematic issues that are in place that perpetuate this behavior. So I never wanted to make a film about one bad guy or one bad company. That's the problem, that person. It was never like that for me. It was always, whoa, how did we get here? Like, how did we get here as a culture?
We talk to parents of teenagers, and our goal always is to shed some light and advice on what we can do to kind of raise our kids differently. I mean, that's really what we're hoping to do, is to take the blight of our society and to somehow be part of the solution moving forward. So if we start with, you have one story in particular that if you could tell us the story, but it is about a middle school girl.
Yeah, so we spotlight the story of Juliet and Lily Bond. That's a mother, Juliet, and a daughter, Lily, who was in 7th grade at Haven Middle School in Evanston, Illinois, which happens to be my old middle school. So I heard this story in the news in 2014, and I couldn't believe what was happening because I went to that school. But basically, Lily, showed up to school in leggings, as so many kids do these days. I'm constantly in leggings as an adult woman. And her principal told her she had to be dress coded, which means she had to put her gym uniform on over her leggings because they were inappropriate. And when she asked why, she was told, and all the students had been repeatedly told, this was the language that was being used, is that her attire was, quote, too distracting for the boys. And so Lily went home and she sort of like in a nonchalant way mentioned to her mom, like, can you take me to buy regular sweatpants? I can't wear leggings anymore. And her mom, who was quite the feminist, an amazing person, said, what? Why do we need to buy you regular sweatpants? And so Lily told her the story, and Juliet was like, oh, no, that's not how this is going to go. And so Juliet, the mother, wrote a letter to the principal to try to change her mind, and also sent it to a local journalist named Christine Wolf. And Christine posted it on her blog, and it went viral. And so CNN picked it up, and Cosmopolitan and Time news vans showed up. Days later, the students were protesting. And it wasn't just Lily, of course. It was so many girls were going through a similar frustration. And over the course,
when they protested, the boys came too, right? It was not.
Yeah, that was what was amazing, is they put up signs in the girls' and boys' bathroom that said, "Are my pants lowering your test scores?" Which was hilarious. And the boys were in on it too. It was like, this is ridiculous. And so they were protested. Some of the boys wore leggings in the protest, and it was just quite an uproar. And so over time, through many PTA meetings, they did change the dress code, not only at Haven Middle School, but also at the high school, which also I went to, Evanston Township High School, and that's a massive school. And so the policy was adopted throughout the entire district, which was that everyone is in charge of their own personal distractions, which is quite a lovely nod to the dress code that came before. So it was a great story about activism and raising your voice, and a mother and daughter coming together and saying, hey, this isn't right. You can't say that your clothes are too distracting for boys and get away with it. And that's such an old way of thinking. And it completely removes the fact that girls have autonomy over their own bodies. It's really about, how are we impacting boys? Why can't boys change their behavior? Why are we not telling boys not to harass girls? Why are we policing girls' bodies first? So it's a nuanced, complex issue, of course. There's more to it at every school. Every parent, every community has this issue in some form. But this was such a great example of mother-daughter saying, like, this isn't right, and doing something about it, and actually creating change.
So the thing that is different about this story than I think the other ones is that the consequences from her activism they don't seem to have been, they seem to be positive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like she was found her voice with her mother. They went out there and they enacted change, and that's all viewed as positive. Um, some of your other stories, not so much. Like that.
Yeah.
So what I want to know from you is, can you see in the stories that you are profiling here, what is there a common characteristic in these women and the one man that
Mm-hmm.
allowed them to speak up? Because they spoke up against tremendous adversity and cost. So what makes someone go silent and live with the shame? And what makes someone have, these were strong people that you profiled, but still they came forward.
Yeah, everyone has to make that choice for themselves. I mean, when you think about, sometimes your economic livelihood is on the line, for you, for your family. It's not always the right move to speak up and risk all of that just to make a point, file a lawsuit, perhaps you're going to be exiled anyway for that. So it's the film is not about everyone should speak up. It's so complicated and every situation is different, but between these 7 stories, I think the common thread would be that courage, that bravery, that resilience to say, this isn't right. And even if it doesn't impact my life today, long term, I need to stand up for other people, for the idea that the world can be better than this, that our culture can shift. And what I love about the different stories is, for example, Cheryl Suhoy was a tech CEO that was sexually harassed after hours, blurred lines. She was trying to secure funding from a venture capitalist in the millions of dollars for Southeast Asia. And this guy, harassed her, and she turned him away, and she didn't want to speak up about it because it might risk the entire deal and impact, hundreds of people. So she waited 3 years to speak up about it once she was away from that situation and had independence and had more power, truly. And then she could say, hey, this happened to me, it wasn't okay, and now I'm speaking up about it. So that's one example of, she spoke up, but when it was right for her in her life. Whereas a 911 dispatcher, Patricia Brooks, who was sexually assaulted while she was on a 911 call by her supervisor, she spoke up immediately. Like that moment, she called her supervisor and said, a different supervisor, and said, you got to come back. This guy did this to me, and you need to fire him, or you need to put him on suspension, something. And ultimately, she took her case all the way up to the Ninth Circuit Court in California and lost, because the judge determined that her case did not meet the legal standard of severe or pervasive behavior. And this was in the late 90s. And it just so happened that very same judge, wouldn't you know it, in 2017 had to step down because of his own sexual harassment allegations. So, and I asked her at the end of the interview, if you could do it all over again, would you still have spoken up? And she said, absolutely, because she showed her daughter later, her daughter wasn't in her life at that point, but she showed her daughter, like, this is what you do when someone does something wrong to you, speak up. And her daughter did that as well. Her daughter was assaulted in a park or something, and they found the guy, they caught him because she, gave a sketch, and so it's so messy and complicated. I wish there was a, like, always do this, but that's just not how life works. And but these stories, there's so much bravery and courage and foresight to see a better future. And even just if their only purpose was to share their story in this film, I hope that I can do right by them and do them justice by sharing it and having people talk about it and learn from it. And hopefully we shift the culture slowly but surely.
Yes. Hopefully hopefully your documentary really moves us in that direction. I was going to ask you at the end, but why don't you tell us now how someone who's listening to this can watch the documentary if they are, as they should, by the way, everyone should watch it. Watch it
Yeah.
as a family. It's really powerful.
Thank you. Yeah. So, Nevertheless is available for virtual screenings now, meaning that anyone can host their own screening, whether it's a workplace or a school or an organization, through IndieFlix, which is our wonderful distributor. You had Sheila Andreen on the show recently. She's the executive producer of Nevertheless and my mentor and role model. And so, with her help, we are fully committed to getting this film to the right places so that it can spark conversation. We have a whole discussion guide that goes with the film. We have a school discussion guide, so it has curriculum and activities and questions that accompany those stories that are showcased. We also have a workplace version. So we're truly committed to this film helping to move the needle and not just throwing it up online and hope people watch it and share it. We really want it to be a conversation starter. So yeah, anyone can host a screening, and to learn more, you can go to neverthelessfilm.com.
And are people using it like now that we've eliminated a lot of outside opportunity, although some of it's coming back? Have you seen people putting things together virtually for schools and organizations?
Yeah, I think schools will definitely pick up for the fall. I think everybody's been sort of like, what am I doing with my homeschooling? But IndieFlix has such a massive database of schools and organizations that they've worked with before. In fact, I've been working with them for the last 6 years for my first feature documentary, The Empowerment Project. But yeah, we've been working with workplaces. We screened at Pixar in March, right before the pandemic hit. And we're working with the Gina Davis Institute and Women in Film. So we've got a bunch of different organizations that are starting to host screenings and bring it to their members. And so we're really excited to see. Even just last week, we had a screening that was international. So we had 160 people show up and from countries all over the world, and people are interacting and chatting and asking questions. So although it's not the year I anticipated with the film, I think it's a really unique opportunity to reach more people.
So you started by saying you did this film because you have a daughter and you wanted to create a safer world for her. Um, if you have a son, what does that look like? What should parents, is this a conversation with girls or is this a conversation with people?
Oh, more. Oh, yeah. I mean, first of all, I would love to have a son, but this is a conversation for absolutely everyone. In fact, it is perhaps more important for boys and men to watch this film. I always thought when I was making it, if I only show this to girls and women, then I'm not really going to move the needle, right? I'm just going to be preaching to the choir. I want women and girls to feel heard and seen, of course. But the only way this situation gets better is if men and boys are involved too, and they examine their role as allies. And we're not pointing the finger at anybody here. We're not saying like men are bad. That would be a huge error on any filmmaker's part to sort of alienate an entire group of people. But I love how Dale Thomas Vaughan in the film, he's an activist and speaker, talks about like this is largely a men's issue. The perpetrators are largely male. It's like 98% of this is men to women, men to men, of course, as well. So if men can't fix this, then nobody can. Like if women wanted to fix the fight for equality, they would have done it already. Like we would have solved this years ago if we could on our own. So we need men at the table. You know, we need men part of the solution, that we need men standing up for us in the workplace and saying, hey, I'm not okay with the way you treated my colleague just now. Are you okay? Or listening. And we need men and women in positions of leadership that are sensitive to these issues and that are aware of what can happen, you know, in a workplace environment. So yeah, it's sort of at every level, we really need more understanding, more empathy, and we need allyship in order for anything to truly change.
So I don't think we can tell people what they should be doing with their kids and how we're going to arm them with all of the resources they need to never have anything happen. But I think what we can tell parents is that sit down with your family and watch this movie because it will be a conversation starter. And I think that for all of us who are raising kids right now, there's probably nothing more important than having this conversation for their future. So Sarah Moshman, thank you so much for being here with me again, because we did have a conversation about your empowerment project a few years ago.
Yeah.
And I look forward to whatever's coming next.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.